Hey guys, tonight we saddle up for something quietly remarkable on Empire of Horsemen. Arrows, and, believe it or not, paperwork. You're heading out under a violet sky across the windswept Mongolian steppe, where the grass shifts like a breathing sea and the stars come out in arrogant clusters. You feel your breath catch with the cold and the sheer scale of what's around you endless. Flat nothing, and then a horizon smeared with campfires and ambition. This isn't a battlefield. It's a postal route. Yeah, the Mongol Empire, more. Famous for razing cities and collecting severed heads, then slipping a note under your door, actually ran one of the most sophisticated delivery networks the world had ever seen. You probably won't survive this era. Unless you like fermented mare's milk and sleeping on wool next to people who've never heard of toothpaste. But if you stick around long enough, you just might help invent global logistics. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your current location and the time where you are. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together, your pony is tired, and to be honest, so are you. But you're still traveling, because when you're part of the Great Khan's relay system, sleep comes second. The Mongol night is dry and glassy, and somewhere beyond those gentle hills, a message needs delivering. The weight of empire isn't always a sword, it's often a scroll tied with leather, slung in a satchel rubbed with sheep tallow to keep the dew out. Behind you, the campfire is flickering low. You can hear a boy somewhere singing to the horses, not for your benefit, but for theirs. Mongol horses, short and shaggy like grumpy goats with attitude, were trained to follow song more than reins. You shift in your saddle and feel the stiff leather creak against your legs, already sore from yesterday's ride. Your boots are heavy with dust and the faint, earthy aroma of dung smoke. Your destination, a way station just 10 miles away, doesn't sound far, but try crossing this terrain in the dark with only moonlight and your pony's instincts. Still, the Mongol network makes it work. And it's not just messages sometimes, it's supplies, orders, or prisoners. Other times, it's just gossip wrapped in wax and carried across kingdoms. It all starts, strangely enough, with Genghis Khan Temujin. If you knew him before the moustache, before he united the tribes and became a world-conquering legend, he was a scrappy warlord with more ambition than allies. To maintain power, he needed loyalty. To command loyalty, he needed communication. And to communicate, he needed speed. Not the kind you snort, the kind that gallops. There were no roads out here, just wind, hooves, and trust. Some historians still argue whether the Mongols truly invented their postal system or whether they adapted it from earlier nomadic routes and Chinese relay systems. Either way, Genghis made it official. His riders trained, relentless, and lightly armed, could move faster than most armies. And they didn't just move forward, they returned with answers. You tighten your cloak against the chill. The stars above you are unsettling in their brightness. No air pollution, no glow from distant cities, just the universe, screaming quietly. Your pony stops, snorts, and shakes its mane like it's judging you. Ahead, in the near dark, a blur of fabric. Waves, a flag, a marker. The way station is near. When you finally arrive, it's quieter than you expected. Just one elder sitting cross-legged by a pot of soup, and a younger boy brushing down a fresh horse. They barely nod at you, as if you've been expected for hours. You dismount and stretch, feeling the saddle imprint on your thighs like a rude tattoo. The elder gestures toward the stew, and you're not sure if that's generosity or an order. You eat. It's warm, salty, and vaguely chewy, probably goat. You don't ask. Across the fire, a fresh rider sharpens a knife. You pass him the satchel. With the letter, he takes it without looking at you. Within minutes, he's gone. The only sign he was ever there is the bowl of half-eaten stew still steaming beside the fire. That's the Mongol postal system. No frills, no bureaucracy, no weekend. Delivery delays. Just grit, saddle sores, and something called the Yama relay network, spanning thousands of miles. From Korea to Eastern Europe, it had stations every 20 to 40 miles, stocked with food, shelter, and replacement horses. Some had guards, some had scribes, most had fleas. Still, this strange system worked. It wasn't just a logistical marvel, it was the circulatory system of empire. Through these endless trails flowed military orders, tax receipts, trade deals, wedding invitations, imperial edicts, spy reports, and these love letters. The Mongols didn't just conquer, they organized. You can't hold an empire together with terror alone. Sooner or later, you have to send someone a memo, and as you pull your blanket tighter and lie beside your now sleeping pony, the last thing you see before you close your eyes is the horizon still lit faintly by a rider vanishing into the east. Hoofbeats barely audible in the dry Mongolian wind. The message goes on, even if you don't. The wind hasn't changed by morning. It still hums across the steppe like a lullaby played on a cracked reed. Your pony breathes softly beside you, its breath puffing into tiny clouds, already munching on dried grass. As you stretch and ease your half-frozen toes into your boots, someone hands you something flat and brownish. No, it's not food, it's bark. Smooth, sanded bark, and on it, a scrawl of brush marks. Welcome to the very beginnings of Mongol correspondence. Genghis Khan, before his name made entire countenance flinch, was obsessed with control of people, of places, and crucially, of information. Early on, he realized what few conquerors before him did. Communication is power. Without it, your allies betray you, your enemies outflank you, and your messages arrive weeks after your city is already burning. But before there were great relay stations and uniformed couriers, there was just necessity and improvisation. One of the earliest long-distance commands issued by the young Khan historians debate whether he was still just Temujin, then was likely scratched or painted on birch bark. Lightweight, flexible, and abundant in northern Asia. It was the perfect substitute before paper became common in Mongol lands. You imagine it now, a warrior seated cross-legged in a smoky tent, a thick-bearded man beside him holding bark in one hand, brush in the other, trying to capture the words of the future Khan before they disappear like breath in the cold. A message about tribute, perhaps, or a threat, or both. The trick, there wasn't a postal system yet. That message had to be carried by a loyal retainer, riding solo through hostile territory with little more than a weapon, the bark scroll, and the terrifying knowledge that losing it might cost them their life. Of course, scholars still argue whether these messages were always written, or more often delivered orally. The Mongols prized memorization and oral tradition. Some say letters were simply a backup, like sticky notes, in case your courier forgot the details. Which, to be fair, is understandable when you're dodging wolves and trying to cross rivers without a bridge. Still, the idea of writing a physical message enduring past the breath that spoke, it had a kind of magic, and magic was useful in uniting tribes who spoke different dialects, distrusted each other, and were more likely to share fermented milk than formal politics. You ride through a shallow stream now, your boots getting wetter than you'd like, your pony unimpressed with the slippery stones. Just beyond the bend is a camp of yurts, pale and round like mushrooms after rain. You're not here to deliver, though. You're here to observe a meeting. The Khan and a group of tribal elders, all seated around a central fire, drinking tea that smells like wood and old promises. One of the elders stands and begins to recite something. It's a message from another camp days away, but he recites it from memory, word for word, complete with the Khan's idioms and pauses. You can feel the weight of each sentence as the others nod, frown, or chuckle softly at the occasional dig, hidden in the phrasing. Then he reaches into his tunic and pulls out that same piece of bark. It matches the message exactly. Redundant, maybe, but reliable. This was the early seed of what would become a system. Even before formal way stations were built, even before messengers had standardized uniforms or special privileges, Genghis Khan was laying the groundwork for a network that could reach from the Pacific to the Black Sea. And it wasn't just for war. One of Genghis's underrated qualities beneath the raiding and flaming arrows was his curiosity. He wanted to know what was happening across his empire, whether it was a new kind of metalworking in Bukhara or a merchant overcharging peasants in northern China. He wanted to know how people lived, what they believed, what they wore. Messages weren't just about commands. They were about learning, adjusting, understanding. This thirst for knowledge, alongside the much more practical thirst for taxes, was what drove the early postal riders to exist. Their first task was to create a rhythm, reliable, predictable movement. No small feat when half the terrain was frozen wasteland and the other half was occupied by bandits with excellent aim. You pass by a makeshift resting site, now just a patch of cleared earth. A few stones arranged in a circle and hoofprints, all pointing in the same direction. It's not much, but it speaks of a pattern forming. A route, however primitive. Some of the earliest relay couriers weren't even full-time messengers. They were simply men trusted by the Khan, men whose loyalty and horse stamina were both beyond question. Many had no written guides. They memorized routes, stopped at sacred trees or unusual rock formations, and prayed that the stars wouldn't shift too much between trips. You pause near a dry hill and squint at the horizon. There's a faint movement, a lone rider, silhouetted against the setting sun, galloping westward. You don't know what he's carrying, but you know it matters. It always does. And as the last light disappears and you wrap your cloak tighter, you realize something. This system, rough and improvised as it is, has already begun to change everything. The Mongols aren't just using the land, they're connecting it, from bark scrolls to breathless memorization, from night rides across nothing to meals warmed by strangers. Fire's every piece of this system is stitched together by urgency and vision, and whether that vision is wrapped in leather, bark, or parchment, it's already galloping across the world. The cold still clings to your cloak as you ride again, hooves crunching over dry grass, brittle from wind. But now, the journey feels different. There's purpose humming beneath your saddle. You're not just riding your part of something. You're riding the yam. That's what the Mongols called it, not the vegetable. The word yam referred to the relay network itself, a term that came to mean not just the stations, but the system riders, roads, rest stops, and all. You wouldn't know it by looking around right now, though. There are no road signs, no milestones, just wind-worn markers and the invisible rhythm of hooves pounding the empire into motion. The yam wasn't built all at once, like most Mongol creations. It grew by necessity. Genghis Khan started with tribal roots and personal messengers, but after a few critical victories and a whole lot of territory added to the empire, he needed something faster, bigger, more consistent, and so relay stations began popping up every 25 to 40 miles, close enough that one horse could sprint the distance before tiring, but far enough to cover serious ground in a single day. A single message could leapfrog across the steppe rider to station, horse to horse, without ever stopping to sleep. The goal, uninterrupted speed. You approach one now, a low cluster of yurts, half camouflaged by earth tones and soot. A tall pole marks the station, draped with colored cloth that flutters lazily in the breeze. You slow your horse not from caution, but because you've earned a breather. This is a place where travelers arrive, bone-weary, and leave refueled, rebundled, and remounted. You're greeted by a woman with weathered hands who doesn't speak, but pours you a wooden bowl of something that smells like yogurt and vinegar. You drink. It's kumis-fermented mare's milk, slightly fizzy, definitely unsettling, but full of calories. Next to you, a younger rider is being handed a bundle of dried meat and a new bridle. No fuss, no conversation. The station lives. By efficiency, one historical source describes the yam network as boasting over 1,400 relay posts at its peak. That's more than a few units. These stations weren't random huts in the wilderness. They were stocked with food, replacement saddles, fodder for the horses, and often guarded by soldiers loyal to the Khan. Some even had their own staff of scribes who helped transcribe messages, especially if a courier had memorized the contents orally but couldn't write. You duck inside one of the yurts and are greeted by the thick smell of wool, smoke, and damp leather. There are scrolls tucked into clay jars, a brush stand in the corner, and blankets folded tightly beside a low fire pit. It's not glamorous, but after 3 days in the wind, it might as well be a palace. Here's the thing that sets the yam apart. It wasn't just about riders. It was a whole infrastructure built into the empire's skin. Local families were assigned to care for the stations, feed the animals, and ensure a fresh horse was always ready. If they failed, well, the Mongol justice system didn't offer many second chances. You nibble on dried lamb as you listen to the quiet clatter of hooves outside. A new courier arrives. He doesn't stop to chat. He hands over a sealed pouch, drinks half a bowl of kumis, grabs a fresh mount, and is gone within 5 minutes. You blink, and the dust is already settling. Historians still argue whether the yam was faster than Roman roads or just better tailored to its environment, but no one denies that it worked. The Mongols, often painted in pop history as brute warriors, were actually administrative nerds with an empire-spanning spreadsheet in their heads. The yam is Exhibit A. Even better, it wasn't just for government use. The Khan's decree allowed certain merchants, scholars, and diplomats to use the network if they had the right permissions. But more on that in a later section. For now, you finish your meal and stretch your back. There's another courier snoring softly in the corner, blanket over his face. Boots still dusty from the gobi. You resist the urge to nap. This isn't a vacation. You still have messages to deliver. Before you go, you run your hands over the carved wooden map on the station wall. It's crude, just lines and dots and circles, but it represents something enormous. Connection in a world without phones or satellites. A whisper could travel hundreds of miles in a matter of days, sometimes faster you step back into the sun, and a stable boy hands you a fresh pony. Smaller than your last one, maybe even grumpier, but fast. Very fast. You climb on, tuck the leather-wrapped scroll into your satchel, and set off again. The hooves strike the earth with new purpose. You're not just delivering a message, you're helping hold together the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever known. All thanks to a system built on yachts, sheep, fat, and endless endurance, and maybe a bit of fermented courage in a wooden cup. You've been riding for hours now, but it's hard to keep track. The sun moves in slow arcs across the sky, casting long shadows from distant rock outcrops and herds of shaggy livestock in the distance. You catch the occasional glint of a metal stirrup or a banner fluttering near a distant station, but mostly it's just you and the steady rhythm of hooves. Eventually, up ahead, you spot it, another yam post. This one looks busier than the last. 2 horses are tied out front, blowing. Steam from their nostrils like small dragons. The air here is sharper higher altitude. Maybe and your stomach is beginning to rumble. As you dismount, someone tosses you a strip of dried meat without a word. Another thrusts a bowl of warm, pale liquid into your hands. It's salty, familiar, and it smells faintly like sheep. You've arrived at a full-service relay station, complete with food, lodging, and most importantly, fresh horses. The Mongols believed a tired man was only half useful, but a tired horse was a crisis. These way stations were stocked with remounts, small muscular ponies bred for endurance, not comfort. Mongol horses weren't built for beauty. They were the mail trucks of their day, sturdy, simple, slightly irritable. Inside the yurt, the atmosphere is cozy but cluttered. Saddle blankets hang drying from the rafters. A pot of stew bubbles in the corner. In the center, a leather toolkit is spread out on the floor, saddle straps, hoof files, bits of sinew for repairs. One rider is rubbing sheep fat into a stiff leather harness. The smell is sharp, but oddly comforting. Sheep fat, you discover, was one of the Mongol post's great unsung heroes. It waterproofed leather, it softened boots. It helped preserve satchels and saddle cords. Rubbed into a cracked bowstring, it could even prevent it from snapping during a sudden rainstorm. You smear a bit on your boot, seems like ancient duct tape, but smellier. Out back, you walk among the horses. Each one is tied loosely to a post, but none of them seem restless. These animals know the drill. A handler points out which ones are ready, still warm from exercise, not too winded. You pick a stocky grey one, already saddled and chewing cud like it has somewhere better to be. The handoff is seamless. There's no small talk, just a nod and a silent exchange of gear. It's all about efficiency. The Mongols weren't big on sentiment when it came to the mail. No letters from grandma tied with ribbon here. Just terse commands, coded dispatches, and every so often, a tax ledger that could sink a nobleman's dreams. As you're preparing to ride again, one of the handlers taps your shoulder and hands you a small leather pouch for supplies, just in case. Inside, you find a bit of charcoal for marking, a folded piece of parchment, and a few crumbles of dried milk curds. Not luxurious, but it'll keep you from fainting on the next leg. Historians still debate how many people staffed each yam station. Some argue for just a few families per post, others for dozens of workers and guards. What's agreed upon is that running a station was a full-time job. The empire issued goods and tax exemptions in return for service. Fail to maintain your horses. The wrath of the Khan wasn't theoretical. You mount your new pony hoo. immediately decides to test your patience by spinning in a circle before moving forward. You mutter a few insults under your breath, and off you go again. This next stretch of road is more challenging. The terrain changes beneath you, no longer flat and forgiving, but rocky, scattered with brush and tight passes between low ridges. Yet the yam posts kept coming. Even in treacherous areas, the network held. That was the brilliance of it. Mongols didn't just build for convenience, they built for consistency. You start to notice signs that the yam has been here longer than most empires last. Stones blackened from decades of campfires, wooden beams polished from the hands of countless couriers, a horse skull tied to a pole knot for decoration, but as a marker, a quiet way of saying this post was honored. As you crest a small ridge, the wind picks up. The pony huffs, then keeps moving. You pat its neck, more grateful than you'd like to admit, because out here, between stations, the silence becomes enormous. You start to forget you have a destination. All that matters is the road, the rhythm, the relay. One curious detail you overheard back at the station still lingers in your mind. That Genghis Khan issued decrees called Yasatu punish anyone who mistreated postal riders or damaged yam property. These weren't symbolic laws. If someone stole a courier's horse or delayed a message, the punishment could be severe, even death. It wasn't about cruelty, it was about principle. The yam had to work, or the empire wouldn't, and so it did. Work for decades, across deserts, mountains, marshes, and frozen plains. Whether through snowstorms or heat waves, the yam connected capital to frontier, command post to village, war council to wandering monk. You pass a lone goat herder on the way down the ridge. He waves lazily with a staff, not breaking stride. You wave back. He knows what you are. The satchel at your hips says everything. You're not just a traveler. You're a vein in the great body of empire, pulsing with news, orders, and ideas. As night begins to fall again, you spot another post ahead. Smoke curls from the chimney hole. Somewhere inside, a blanket waits, maybe even a hot drink. Your pony snorts as if relieved. Tomorrow you'll ride again. But for now, the yam carries you just as much as you carry it. And that's the point, isn't it? You wake to the smell of something sweet and faintly burnt. Someone's made flatbread over coals, and it's just crisping at the edges. You don't even hesitate, just reach out, break a piece, and chew slowly while your legs try to remember how to be legs again. The yurt is already emptying. A rider laces his boots with practiced speed. A woman tightens a girth strap, her face focused and weather-worn. Nobody speaks much in the mornings here. Sleep is a luxury. The yam doesn't wait for yawns. As you ready your next ride, an older man approaches, holding a bundle swaddled in felt and bound with cord. Urgent, he says, voice flat. You nod and take it, the weight surprisingly heavy for something the size of a small melon. Turns out, it's not just letters that ride. The yam, it's everything: sealed documents, royal gifts, sacred relics, even biological specimens. But today, it's a hardened leather tube holding a small, bone-handled arrowhead. The message that rides with it is clear. War is in the air. You don't get details. That's not your job. But the leather pouch is marked with a symbol. You recognize military dispatch. And that means you're not just galloping for honor or mail. You're galloping for the survival of someone's outpost, or for a general waiting in a dusty war tent halfway across the world. You ride fast, military, messages often had priority in the Mongol Yam system. Some dispatches traveled with armed escorts. Others, especially the most critical, were handed to elite couriers, experienced riders who knew every twist of trail, every shallow ford, every safe grove to sleep beneath if the night closed in. Your horse is fast today, young, light on its hooves, and eager to run. You make time across low grasslands, through scattered groves where birds scatter at your passing. You ride as if your name is stitched into the fate of the empire. Here's something odd, one of those delightful fringy details that gets buried beneath the textbook summaries. Sometimes messages were hidden, not just tucked under a coat, but sewn into a saddle, or carved onto slivers of wood and lacquered. There are even tales, though historians argue their truth, of messages written in minuscule script on rice paper, then rolled and stuffed into hollow arrow shafts. If caught, the message was useless unless you knew to break the arrow. Efficient, slightly paranoid, extremely Mongol. You pass a broken tree where someone maybe yesterday, maybe last year, has left a marker. Strips of cloth tied to branches, fluttering like ghost flags. It's a safe sign you're on the right path. The yam wasn't just fussed, it was reliable, which, in the 13th century, was about as rare as a wolf who babysits. A single military command could travel hundreds of miles in a matter of days. That kind of speed could win battles before the enemy knew a war had begun. You remember something you overheard back in the station. A courier had supposedly once covered nearly 300 miles in a single day using relay horses. Most scholars settle closer to 200, but even that number is astonishing. Imagine medieval Europe pulling that off. Not likely, unless you strapped a pigeon to a catapult. And while the messages were fast, they were also confidential, at least as far as possible. The Mongols took security seriously. Seals were common. So were cords knotted in specific patterns to show tampering. In some cases, couriers memorized the message entirely and carried no written copy at all. You reach another station by late afternoon. This one is smaller, humbler, just a yurt and a wooden lean-to with a fire already going. A woman greets you with a bowl of broth and points at a low bench, where another rider is cleaning a horse's hooves. You hand over the leather pouch. She doesn't open it, just nods and disappears into the yurt with it. Another rider will carry it further. You've done your leg. That's the whole point. Short sprints, not long marathons. The Empire's messages move faster than you do. Sitting by the fire, you exhale slowly. Your legs throb, but there's something quietly thrilling about what you've just done. You're not a warrior, not a noble, just a dusty messenger. But you've just moved information across a continent. The others sit quietly with you, eating bread or mending tack. One of them pulls out a curved horn and begins rubbing beeswax into it. Message container, waterproof, tight as a drum. Historians still argue whether the Mongol yam influenced later European courier systems. Some say it directly inspired parts of Russia's Yamshik network. Others claim Marco Polo's accounts were too exaggerated to have much practical influence. Either way, it's clear the Mongols weren't just borrowing ideas. They were building something specific, and it worked. Outside, a pony nick. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of smoke and something faintly metallic. You think about that arrowhead in the leather pouch. Where is it now? Already halfway to its destination. Is someone reading the message it carried? You'll never know. You weren't supposed to, but you do know this. The Mongols didn't just conquer cities. They conquered distance. And that arrowhead message carried over miles of ice and dust, and grass might just change everything. It's nearly dawn when you're handed a curious object, a flat, rectangular slab of metal, polished on one side and heavy enough to double as a bludgeon in a tight spot. It's engraved with flowing script, worn smooth along the edges where dozens of fingers have gripped it before yours. This is a dredged imperial passport of the Mongol Empire, and with it, you now hold the authority to ride the yam like royalty. Well, not quite royalty, but close enough. The jurej is more than just a travel permit. It's a portable symbol of the Khan's trust, a relic that parts crowds and opens yacht flaps across the empire. Hold it up and postmasters feed you. Handlers swap out horses without complaint. Locals offer shelter, firewood, even advice on the safest mountain pass or which rivers are frozen enough to cross. You strap it inside your cloak, close to your chest. It's cold against your ribs, like a metallic heartbeat pulsing with ancient bureaucracy. You ride out that morning with a new confidence. The pony beneath you seems to sense it, moving with a kind of proud efficiency. No more half-hearted trots. Today, you ride like an envoy historically. These Jurej passes came in many forms, silver, even gold, depending on the status of the holder. They often bore the imperial seal and sometimes included an inscription like, "By the power of the eternal blue sky." If that doesn't sound like something out of a fantasy novel, you're not listening hard enough. You reach your next station, where two guards glance at you, then spot the Jurej hanging from your sash. Their faces change. Not to fear, exactly, but something close to respect. One disappears inside the main yurt. A moment later, someone emerges with a bowl of steamed dumplings and a fur-lined blanket. Rest an hour, they say. Your next mount is strong. Best after food. You don't argue while you eat. You listen. One of the handlers talks about a courier who once rode across 7 stations in 2 days, using only his jurej and a stubborn little mare named Brick. Others mention abuses of the past traders, forging their own versions, or corrupt officials, demanding bribes in exchange for access. The empire took such violations seriously. The yam was sacred ground. Historians still argue about how standardized these passports really were. Some say they varied wildly depending on the region or the official issuing them. Others suggest that the core authority, the name of the Khan, was enough to validate anything, even a muddy scrap of parchment. What's clear is this: the jurej made the impossible. Routine. You finish your food, tuck the blanket under your arm, and step outside. The pony is ready, saddled, fed, standing, like a furry statue. The road curves gently east, hugging a range of hills with snow still clinging to their flanks. You ride the jurej. Doesn't make the wind any warmer or the trail any smoother, but it does open doors. You notice it everywhere now, little shifts. In posture, the way people speak to you. This system, this dusty, hoof-beaten, windswept miracle of logistics relies entirely on cooperation. And the jurej is its currency. There are even reports, though again debated, of jurej holders being able to requisition food, housing, or even temporary military assistance if the situation demanded it. The idea was clear. If you held the pass, you weren't just a traveler. You were the voice of the empire. You pass through a narrow valley where an old woman tends goats near a stone marker. You raise the jurej in greeting. She nods once and points toward a safer trail through the ravine. You follow her direction without hesitation. It saves you hours. It strikes you just how interconnected this system is. Not just couriers and horses, but regular people. Herders, cooks, weavers, guards, woodcutters, all of them part of the great hum of Mongol communication, all of them tuned to the same message. Keep the word moving. By midday, you stop at a station nestled in a rocky hollow. It's smaller than most, no yurt in sight, just a stone shelter and a pair of shaggy horses dozing in the shade. But inside, the fire is lit and the tea is warm. You flash the station master nods slowly, reaches for a thin tablet of parchment, and records your arrival. They use soot ink and a sliver of bone, nothing fancy, just enough to keep the Empire's records intact. It's one of those quiet marvels. No one writes poems about paperwork. The Mongols, though mostly oral in tradition, still managed an impressive level of documentation. Routes were tracked, riders recorded, deliveries timed. Someone, somewhere, was keeping score. You leave that station refreshed, satchel lighter, stomach fuller. The road ahead curves through grasslands dotted with herds. You see a lone eagle circling overhead and a child running barefoot toward a grazing horse. The world feels open, structured, yet gentle in its motion. As the sun dips low and the shadows grow long, you come upon a rider traveling the opposite direction. He nods, you nod. He raises a bronze gerige like a silent salute. Yours is silver. For a brief moment, you're just two messengers passing in the amber light of empire. Your horses breathing steam and your hands full of messages. And then he's gone, and the road is yours again. The message continues to move, whether you carry it or someone else does. Because in the Mongol Empire, power didn't just come from conquest, it came from knowing, and knowing traveled by horse. The next morning begins before the sun fully commits to rising. You squint at a sky still caught between bruised purple and faint gold. Stretch your limbs beside a dying fire and sip a hot, bitter brew someone insisted was tea. You're not entirely convinced, but it's warm and it keeps your hands from freezing. That's good enough. Today's journey is less about speed, more about navigating terrain. You're headed into hill country now, an area that doesn't get many couriers. The route bends through gullies and soft, loamy ravines where hoofprints disappear within minutes. The wind carries the scent of wild thyme and dust. Somewhere nearby, a marmot whistles. This route exists because the yam must exist everywhere, not just in the flat, imperial heartlands, but deep into the difficult places, the remote, the inconvenient, the suspiciously bare-filled. The Mongols knew that information shouldn't just reach cities, it had to reach borders. Garrison posts, tiny tribal settlements who barely acknowledged the empire, let alone participated in it, and so, the postal system extended itself like a living organism, veins, snaking outward, curling into the empire's fingertips. You arrive at a station that looks more like a hidden camp. 3 yurts blend so well into the hill they might vanish if you blink. A boy is tending a sick foal, while a grizzled man sharpens something that might once have been a sword. You show your gerige. He nods, gestures for you to sit. You eat a root vegetable that tastes like someone tried to turn sadness into food. Then ask for water. The jug they hand you smells faintly of onions, but at this point, your standards have adjusted dramatically. One of the elders at the station tells a tale while you rest. It's about a courier who once survived 3 days in a blizzard by gutting a yak and sleeping inside. Still delivered the message. He grins. Smelled like old soup, but alive. Historians still debate the accuracy of stories like these. Were they literal, Were they heroic exaggerations passed down by relay families trying to make their work sound nobler? Either way, they capture a truth. The yam demanded everything, and sometimes it gave back legends. You saddle up again, guided, now by instinct more than markers. The path is unclear, just a suggestion of a trail weaving between rocky ledges and thorny shrubs. But your pony seems confident, its hooves choosing solid ground like it's done this 100 times. Maybe it has. Some Mongol riders were known to travel blindfolded at night, letting the horse choose the way. These animals weren't just transportation. They were GPS with a tail. Short, strong, nearly impossible to spook, and capable of surviving on grass that looked more like sandpaper. You crest a ridge, and the land opens up. Below you is a wide basin dotted with streams, and on the far end barely visible a smoke. Trail from the next post. You remember reading somewhere that the Mongols placed their stations not just for distance, but for survivability. Close enough that a rider, even injured, could limp the rest of the way. Remote enough that they could be defended against raiders. It was a balance between reach and realism. Of course, not every part of the network was perfect. There were posts that fell into disrepair, stations that were sacked during uprisings or conflicts, and yet the yam was rebuilt again and again, patched, moved, resupplied. Like any good system, it adapted. One fringe theory you've heard, which scholars haven't agreed on, is that some posts in very remote regions doubled as intelligence-gathering sites. After all, if you run a relay network, you also run a surveillance network. You know who's sending what, where, and when. There's no official evidence of it being organized espionage, but there are enough coincidences to make you wonder. You reach the station as dusk settles like a wool blanket. The handlers there look surprised to see anyone coming from the hill route. Most couriers take the longer road around, but they don't ask questions. You're offered soup, a bedroll, and a horse for the morning. Inside the yurt, it's quiet except for the rhythmic sound of someone sharpening a blade. On the central post, etched with age, is a small piece of parchment pinned with bone, a map of trails, some crossed out, some marked with recent changes. Roads shifted here often. Floods, landslides, feuds. You mark your own route with a charcoal. ... The yam was never just a highway. It was alive, reactive, organic. Stations like this were its nerve endings, far-flung, maybe even forgotten, but still twitching with the pulse of the empire. You drift, to sleep on a felt mat, warmed by fire and fatigue. Somewhere outside, your pony snorts. A dog barks twice, then is silent. You close your eyes, knowing tomorrow brings more riding, more messages, more dust in your teeth. But tonight, you're part of something strange and sprawling and magnificent. The quiet frontier of empire, the whisper behind the roar. You wake in the dark to the sound of rain tapping softly against the yurt. Not a storm, just a steady, whispering drizzle that makes everything feel slower, quieter, wrapped in gauze. Your legs ache. Your shoulders feel like someone politely dropped a sack of rocks on them overnight. But the fire's still warm, and there's fresh flatbread beside you. You eat without thinking, the bread gone before your brain catches up today. You're riding through riverland, low-lying marshy stretches where paths turn to puddles, and every hoofbeat sounds like a question. Will I sink here? How about here? The yam didn't stop just because the ground got wet. It adjusted as you mount a smaller, wide-footed pony bred for this very terrain. The handler grins and says, "Good swimmer." You're not sure if he means the horse or you, but you nod politely anyway. The Mongol postal system was relentless about environmental adaptation. In snow-heavy regions, messengers were given fur-wrapped boots, sleds, or extra mounts. In arid deserts, stations stocked up on waterskins and shade canopies. Along river routes like this, couriers sometimes rode half-submerged, boots soaked for days, clothes stiff with dried mud. You cross your first river by a wooden ferry, little more than a raft tugged by rope. It creaks under the weight of the pony, but holds. A boy with a reed flute hums something tuneless as he pulls you across. The banks are dotted with reeds, and the world feels soft and smudged. Not all yam paths were equal. Some were grand wide, well marked, flanked by friendly posts and spare horses. Others were like this, soggy, overgrown, and entirely dependent on the goodwill of locals. You recall tales of couriers improvising, rafts from tree limbs, or bribing fishermen to ferry them past flooded trails. The messages had to move, no matter what. And here's the twist-sum of the most important Mongol messages traveled by boat. It's true, in regions where rivers ran faster than horses, the yam sometimes handed off dispatches to boatmen, small, sleek vessels often manned by people who barely spoke. Mongolian would glide down river with sealed scrolls stashed under deck planks. Communication wasn't limited to one mode. If water worked better than hoof, the Mongols used it. Historians still debate just how integrated this aquayam really was. Some think it was ad hoc, temporary, regional, while others believe it was a formalized branch, particularly during Kublai Khan's reign in Yuan, China. What's certain is this: the Mongols didn't worship tradition, they worshipped effectiveness. You continue along a winding trail, raised just above the muck and ancient path of packed reeds and sand. Occasionally, you spot other riders' tracks, hoofprints, a half-eaten strip of jerky on a rock, even a small leather pouch tied to a branch. A message for another courier, or just lost luggage. Hard to tell. Then ahead, shouting, you slow the pony and crest a small rise. Below you is a post station flooded. The yurts sit awkwardly in ankle-deep water. Two handlers are hauling gear onto a raised wooden platform, while a third tries unsuccessfully to corral a goat with a broken tether. You dismount and wade in. They're surprised but not unhappy to see you. You show your gerej, and they guide you to a dry corner under a tilted roof. One of them hands you a wrapped scroll. Northbound, she says. Urgent. Her face is unreadable, but her eyes say, "We're relying on you." You tuck the scroll into your pouch, double wrap it in oiled leather, and tighten the flap. Later, as you ride, you realize the station hadn't asked your name. They didn't need to. The joej was enough. The yam ran on function, not familiarity. Some say that's what made it cold, efficient, inhuman, but from where you sit, boots soaked, saddle worn smooth, rain dripping from your hood, it feels almost familial, like a rhythm. Each station a heartbeat, each rider a pulse. You pass a field where someone has laid stones in the shape of an arrow pointing left. Not a natural path, but a message to those who know how to read it. You follow. It saves you half a day. There's an old folk tale you remember hearing about a courier who rode with a cracked rib and still delivered his message early. When asked how he did it, he said, "I let the horse read the sky." No one really knows what that means, but it's quoted often in these parts. Usually while limping by sunset, the rain has stopped, leaving everything gleaming and quiet. The trail solidifies under your pony's hooves, and the marshes give way to rolling plains. You spot a flicker of light in the distance, a station fire, signaling its readiness. You aim for it, even though your body begs for sleep right here on the road. When you arrive, a teenager takes your pony without a word, and someone else hands you a rag to dry off. Inside the yurt, your clothes steam as you sit near the fire. The scroll, still sealed, is safe. You place it gently beside your pack. Another rider eyes it, then nods slightly. They know what it means to carry weight that isn't yours, and to carry it well. You stir to the smell of something savory fat sizzling on a flat rock, a hint of garlic or maybe wild onion. Your eyes flutter open, still grainy with sleep, and a nearby handler tosses you a strip of cooked meat with a grin. "Breakfast," he says, before turning back to the fire. You chew mechanically, grateful for anything warm. The pony from last night is already gone, swapped out, rested, replaced. In its place stands a speckled mare with long ears and the unmistakable expression of "Don't test me." You do up the saddle carefully and murmur something reassuring. The mare rolls her eyes, but doesn't bite. Today's route will take you through settlements, not major cities. Just clusters of yurts and tiny villages dotting the fringes of rivers and hills. While the yam was a courier's domain, it threaded its way through real lives, and you're about to ride through them. You leave the post at first light. The sun's just breaking the horizon, golden across the grass. You pass herders coaxing sheep with flutes, children chasing dogs through brush, a woman stirring something in a massive kettle outside her tent. Everyone seems to have somewhere to be, something to do, though none of them seem in much of a hurry. When the Mongols built the yam, they didn't isolate it. It was designed to pass through life. Unlike the walled postal towers of some empires, the yam often relied on common folk farmers, nomads, fisherwomen to support it. If you were lucky, a village near a post station might provide extra hands. If you weren't, well, you might be down a horse or two by morning. You pass a tiny open-air market, a handful of tents, a stack of turnips, and a man selling roasted crickets with alarming enthusiasm. You stop, try one surprisingly crunchy, and continue. The mare seems unimpressed. In towns like this, the yam rider becomes a bit of a celebrity. Not glamorous, but respected. People know you're not here to gossip, you're here to deliver. Sometimes, the station is the town. Other times, the post yurt stands at a respectful distance, always distinct, always sacred in its purpose. The people around you might not understand what you carry, but they know what it means. Messages from the Khan, orders, updates, news of marriages and deaths, stories from the other side of the continent. If the yam was the empire's bloodstream, you were its wandering heartbeat. You stop briefly at a roadside post outside a hilltop village. The fire here burns smokeless, which means you're close to forests that provide dry, resin-heavy wood. You're offered tea that tastes like pine and pepper. It wakes you right up. One handler tells you're about a time when a wedding message got lost in a flood, so the groom married his cousin instead, just to be safe. The original bride's family didn't take it well. You both laugh. Mongol life had its way of simplifying and complicating things all at once. Historians still argue about just how much autonomy local posts had. Some accounts describe rigid central command, others hint that rural posts made their own decisions, patched their own gear, even invented clever local relay methods. There's likely truth in both. Out here, survival meant flexibility. You leave the village behind and wind up a dusty ridge trail. The mare finally stops giving you attitude, and you find a nice rhythm again. Below, smoke rises from scattered hearths. Life hums along, indifferent to empires, but still touched by them. Here's a fringe detail that makes you smile. Some messengers, especially in China and Persia, were trained to mimic birdsong or whistle specific tunes so that nearby posts could recognize them before they arrived. A sleepy station might perk up at the sound of a lark call that wasn't quite right. Courier incoming. You try whistling one yourself. The mare flicks her ear in annoyance. Later that afternoon, you ride through an open patch of grass where someone's arranged stones in a spiral pattern. Not a marker, not a religious symbol, just art. A sign that even in a hyper-efficient system, someone took the time to make beauty out of boredom. You reach your next stop by twilight. This station sits beside a stream, its yurts raised on platforms. To avoid spring floods, there's a little stone bench outside, rare luxury, and someone's carved a chessboard into it. 2 riders are playing as you arrive. One glances up, nods, and gestures toward a third. Empty cup of tea already waiting for you inside. It's warm and buzzing with quiet activity. A young girl greases a saddle. A man sharpens an axe with far more concentration than seems necessary. You hand off your scroll, your jirej catching the firelight as you do. The message is gone now, but its path continues. The riders here will send it farther, deeper. It will pass hands again and again, traveling through lives and meals and villages and rainstorms until it reaches the right tent, or throne, or battlefield. You're just a part of the middle, but without the middle, nothing ever arrives. You rest. That night beside the fire, watching steam curl from the pot, and listening to a rider tell a tale about a station ghost that unties horses at night. You chuckle softly and drift off mid-story, the world of tea, trails, and silent messages still spinning behind your eyes. The next morning is cold, not the pleasant kind of cold that makes you pull your blanket up a little higher. No, this is the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, makes your teeth ache, and turns your fingers into confused little sausages. Even before you saddle up, you're handed a bowl of porridge that tastes like wet wool and sugar, but you eat every bite. Today's ride is straight into the wind. A sharp, relentless breeze barrels in from the north, flattening the grass and tugging at your sleeves like a needy child. You wrap your scarf a little tighter and lower your head. The mare trudges forward with stoic disapproval. You're crossing into one of the windiest stretches of the Yamen area, known for both its breathtaking sky and its constant, mocking headwinds. The horizon stretches forever in every direction, making you feel like a single, stubborn punctuation mark in a very long sentence. And it's here, in the open places, that you start to notice something. The Yam isn't just physical, it's emotional. This is the part of the journey where things feel quiet, not just around you, but inside you. You begin to count hoofbeats just to pass the time. You hum songs you didn't know you remembered. You talk to your horse, then argue with it, then apologize. You wonder if you're becoming a little odd. You are. That's normal. Out here, couriers were alone for hours, sometimes days. The Mongols knew this could be dangerous, not just for safety, but for sanity. And so some stretches of the Yam were designed to include visual markers, cairns, bone totems, carved poles with red cloth tied to the top. Simple things to say, someone else was here before you. You're not the only one. You spot one of those markers now. Vertical plank with a faded carving of a fish and a slash of paint that's almost certainly blood. It's comforting in a weird way. Your path climbs gently into a high, dry plateau. The temperature drops again, but the view is staggering. You can see 3 stations from here, little dots with smoke trails spiraling into the pale sky. The Yam from this angle looks like a fragile thread pulled taut across the earth. You're part of that thread. At midday, you find a post in the lee of a rock outcrop, shielded from the wind. It's little more than a tent and 2 hitching posts, but there's warmth inside, and that's all that matters. A woman greets you with salted meat and a hot drink that tastes strongly of fermented milk and bravery. You share the fire with 2 other couriers. One's asleep already, his boots steaming near the coals. The other polishes a small brass compass. You swap stories for a while: bad roads, worse weather, one-legged chickens that wouldn't get out of the trail. She tells you about a station where the only drinking water came from melted hailstones, and how it took 4 hours just to make soup. Historians still argue about how standardized the Yam was in regions like this. In the Empire's heartlands, things were tightly controlled, but in places like the high steppes or desert edges, much of the system ran on improvisation and grit. Some stations were built from government funds, others just family homes conscripted into service. If the message got through, nobody cared how you got it there. You ride on that afternoon into gusting crosswinds. The sky darkens slightly, not from rain, but dust kicked up from far-off plains. The mare keeps her head down, ears flattened, trotting with that same stubborn pace that seems to say, "Get in, loser." We're delivering Empire then. Suddenly, movement. A small herd of wild gazelles bounds across your path. Their legs impossibly springy, their direction utterly indifferent to yours. You rein in, watching them vanish over a ridge like ghosts, with excellent cardio. The mare doesn't flinch. She's seen weirder. You pass a trail marker made from antlers and twinan, old style. Yam symbol used in outposts where wood was scarce. Someone's added a little bundle of dried flowers at its base, a tribute, a message, a joke. You'll never know by the time you reach the next post. Your face is chapped and your legs are vibrating from the cold, but the message is intact. You hand it over, sip something hot, and stretch your back like an ancient door creaking open. There's a dog at this post, lopsided, missing a toe, but deeply committed to guarding the fire. It sits next to you and leans slightly into your side. You don't move. You've crossed 1,000 invisible lines to territories of clans, climate. Culture, and the Yam hasn't broken once. It flexed, bent, adapted, but it held, and tomorrow it will carry you further still. The dog is gone by morning, but it left behind a single paw print on your saddle blanket. You take it as a good omen, part superstition, part desperation, and ride out before the frost has fully melted from the grass. Today, the land changes. Again, you're descending from the high plateau into a region stitched with forest. Pines cluster close on either side of the trail, their trunks dark and mossy, their tops whispering secrets to one another that you'll never be invited to hear. The air smells of bark and wet stone. The Yam runs through forest, too. Of course. It does. It ran everywhere. But in places like this, it runs differently, slower, narrower, filtered through trees and shadow. The road becomes a corridor, and visibility shrinks to 30 feet in any direction. You ride more carefully. The pony's ears twitch at every twig snap. Stations in wooded zones tended to be closer together, and for good reason. It wasn't just wolves, though. Yes, there were wolves. It was the darkness. Even by day, these woods dim the sky. A rider, delayed by storm or injury, could get lost here before they even knew it. You pass a crude sign carved into a tree, 3 vertical slashes and a spiral. You've seen it before. It means what you'll pack. Bandits, maybe, or just wild animals with very selective appetites. Either way, you keep moving. And here's the surprising thing. The Yam didn't just tolerate forests, it used them. There's a record, one of those odd little mentions tucked away in an old Chinese chronicle about tree walkers employed in forested regions. Riders who could navigate dense underbrush, swing from low branches, even climb trees to signal nearby. Stations using reflected sunlight. Are they exaggerating? Probably. But some historians think they existed a special class of ultramobile messengers used only in dense zones. You sort of hope it's true. At your next station. Deep in the forest shadow, there's no yurt, just a wood cabin built from rough logs, smoke curling from a stone chimney. You're greeted by a very old man with one eye and a beard like a pinnacone. He squints at your gerege, nods once, and beckons you inside. It's warm, gloriously warm. A fire crackles in the center pit, and something spiced is simmering over it. You sit, you eat. You let your legs remember what stillness feels like. The man speaks little, just enough to confirm your direction, your message, your horse's name. Then he writes something down in a small leather-bound ledger. Riders pass, records remain. The Mongol Empire didn't just move messages, it kept receipts. There are documents, some still intact, that show message logs, horse rotations, even meal quantities per station. The system wasn't just fast, it was accountable. Historians still argue whether this level of record-keeping was consistent across the empire. In China, yes, paper was everywhere, and bureaucracy was the national pastime. But in the steppes, maybe not. Still, it's clear the Yam was more than hoofprints in mud. It was a ledger of trust. You leave the forest station with a new horse and a small pouch tied to your saddle. For the next post, the old man says, you don't ask what's inside. You don't need to. It's probably a letter, maybe dried herbs, or a tiny scroll written in ink, so fine you could read it only under moonlight. The trees thin slightly as you ride on. A squirrel watches from a branch, chewing on something it clearly doesn't want to share. You start humming a tune. Again, something about bread and hoofbeats. You don't remember learning it. You just know it now. Suddenly, a figure appears, ahead another courier. Judging by the horse and the tired but alert posture, you both slow as you approach. There's a protocol here. You nod, show your gerege, maybe exchange a scrap of news. Nothing gossipy. Just road ahead is flooded or bandits near the East Pass. This rider, a woman about your age, tells you the northern crossing is frozen but passable. Stick to the right side, she says. Left is thin ice. Then she's gone, trailing mist behind her like a phantom wrapped in wool. You ride slower now, scanning the trail for signs of that river crossing. When you find it narrow, fast-moving, already whispering the language of free suit, dismount and lead the horse across. The right side holds. The left cracks beneath a fallen branch. You breathe out. Thank the phantom rider silently. By late afternoon, the forest begins to break apart into open valleys. You spot your next post tucked into a grassy hollow. Smoke rises lazily, and horses graze nearby, their ears flicking as you approach. Inside, the station master is young, too young, maybe but charmed. He takes the pouch from your saddle, checks the seal, and nods. Then he hands you a piece of bread with something sweet baked inside. Apple. You think it might be apple. You eat while the fire crackles. Someone plays a stringed instrument in the corner, a song with only 3 notes, but they're lovely in their simplicity. You close your eyes for a moment. This is what the yam does, not just move, connect. You and that rider in the woods. You and the old man with the pinnacle beard. You and the girl handing you apple bread, as if it's the most natural thing in the world. You're all part of this living, breathing thing that spans deserts, mountains, cities, and silence. And tomorrow it will stretch even further. You wake to a sunrise that's more suggestion than spectacle, just a faint bruising of the sky, as if the light is shy today. Still, the fire's been rekindled, your saddle's been oiled, and the next mount stands ready. It's a shaggy brown, gelding with wise eyes and a tail that looks like it survived a windstorm. You give him a gentle pat and swing yourself up. The station master hands you a new dispatch, sealed in a tube of carved bone. Head southeast, he says, pointing toward the low hills just beginning to glow with morning light. You'll pass a merchant camp near the salt flats. Good place to rest. And with that, you're off again. The yam's brilliance wasn't just speed, it was coverage. Your path today winds through places the Empire barely controlled, yet still connected. Not always through force, often through commerce. Salt, silk, amber, pepper, horses, and information merchants loved the yam. It kept roads relatively safe, routes clear, and rumors flowing. And though they couldn't officially use the postal system, many found ways to piggyback on it, hiring retired couriers as guides, following established trails, bribing a handler here and there for warnings about floods or raids. You crest a hill and spot the salt. Flats below pale, grey stretchers, sparkling faintly in the morning haze. A few yurts sit in a huddle near a stream, camels lazing nearby like sleepy ships in a beached harbour. You dismount as you reach the edge of the camp. A woman with a faded blue scarf gestures you over, pointing toward a water trough. Your horse drinks gratefully. You're offered flatbread, salted apricots, and something that might be yogurt or might be soap. You eat it anyway. It's not bad as you sit. A merchant speaks of rumor southern nobles planning a rebellion. New laws passed in Karakoram. A strange eclipse witnessed by riders near Samarkand. You nod, listen, file it away. Even if your bone tube contains only tax records, you're still part of the empire's nervous system. Historians still debate how much the yam influenced Mongol economic dominance. Was it a support system for trade, or was trade merely a side effect of connectivity? It's a fine distinction, but when you see a child using an empty scroll tube as a flute, while 2 men barter over horsehair rope, it all feels connected. The lines blur. You ride on by midday, the sun burns through the haze, casting long shadows across the plains. The land here is flatter, drier cracked earth and twisted shrubs. You pass the remains of a ruined watchtower, its bricks sun and scattered like teeth. A raven watches you from its top, then flaps off, disinterested. Every so often, you see stone piles, some arranged deliberately, others maybe just the leftovers of collapsed shrines or forgotten homes. You pass one with a scrap of red fabric, tied around the top, a prayer, a warning, maybe both. Then, up ahead, Yam Station, unlike any other, it's built into the remains of an old fortress. Its stone walls patched with felt, wood, and ingenuity. Horses clip-clop across cobbles, as if unsure whether to walk or kneel. Inside, the fire pit is surrounded by hanging herbs, bundles of scrolls, and 2 hawks in carved cages. You stare, one blinks. You blink back. This station doubles as a message relay hub. Riders come and go, not all Mongol. Some are Persian, Yugur, even a red-haired man who mutters in broken Chinese. They all carry scrolls. You realize, with a jolt, that yours isn't the only message traveling this road today. It's one of thousands. You hand yours off, receive. Another in return this, one marked with a different seal. You're now carrying instructions meant for a military outpost on the edge of the empire. You ask no questions. You check the seal. You ride on. The Yam's ability to move military orders fast was no accident. During invasions, messages between command centers traveled faster than entire armies. Some scholars credit this alone for many of the Mongols' impossible victories, rapid decision-making, guided by real-time updates. It was like GPS for conquest. You pass a group of travelers heading north, dusty, sunburned, but smiling. One plays a lute. Another offers you a swig of fermented mare's milk. You take it, regret it, and thank them anyway. Your next station is smaller, built into a cave mouth, camouflaged by stacked stones and dried brush. A child leads your horse to water while an elder checks your gearage. Inside, a woman with ink fingers adds your delivery to a scroll rack. You sit by the fire, legs stretched out, and listen to the wind scrape across the cave mouth like a giant sigh. Somewhere behind you, a handler sings a lullaby to a fussy foal, and you realize something strange. You haven't spoken much today, barely a full sentence to anyone, yet you feel deeply, completely included, part of something massive and humming, not because of shared language or philosophy, but because of function, purpose. Everyone here, from the hawk trainer to the child with the water pail, exists in service of motion, and you carry it forward. Tomorrow, you'll ride again. Another station, another message, another dawn, but tonight you sit by the fire with ink on your fingers and dust on your boots, feeling more connected than ever. You wake with the taste of smoke in your mouth and the odd sense that you've dreamed of riding again. You can't be sure anymore where the dreams end and the trail begins. But the saddle waits, and the new scroll you received last night rides snug against your chest, sealed and silent like a sleeping snake. Outside, the landscape shifts once again. Rocky, rugged, almost lunar. You're entering a borderland, a place where terrain becomes a riddle and the Yam begins to thread its way through uncertainty. The wind here has an accent. The hills whisper things you don't understand. The pony you're given today is a little older, a little slower, but sure-footed. You mount up and ease into the rhythm, following a faint path carved by centuries of hooves and time. The Yam didn't stop at borders. In fact, it often ignored them. While most empires built walls, the Mongols built roads. Where others drew lines in the dirt, they built stations on both sides. There were outposts in Persia, deep into the Korean peninsula, even as far west as hungry trails of trust laid down in places where their control was thin but their influence strong. You pass a rocky archway, remnants of something older, pre-Mongol, maybe, a Silk Road relic, or a ruined outpost from a forgotten war. Moss grows on the stone, and someone's etched a tiny horse into the side. You run your fingers over it as you pass. Just a rider greeting another, centuries apart in this no man's. Posts become scarcer, but more vital. You see no stations for hours, then find one carved into the side of a hill, half hidden behind thorny scrub. The handler is a woman with grey braids and one arm. Her smile is wide. She checks your scroll, asks your horse's name, then offers tea without another word. You sit on a flat stone and sip slowly. It's strong, bitter, and perfect. Fringe details about posts like this always fascinated you. Some of them, according to niche travelogues, doubled as libraries. Scrolls, too fragile or outdated for delivery, were stored for reference. Other posts served as waypoints for pilgrims, secret meeting spots for envoys, or even shelters for refugees. Historians still debate the scope of these functions. Were they anomalies, or just undocumented aspects of a sprawling system? You ride. On, the land getting wilder. Eventually, you reach a cliff road where wind howls like a wounded flute. Below, a river curls through a canyon, churning like boiling tea. You stick to the inside edge, letting the pony hug the trail. Every step feels like a negotiation with gravity. And then, a hawk cries overhead. You look up just in time to see a falconer's post jutting from a nearby cliff, a tethered perch, a strip of red cloth fluttering. You blink. Yes, you've heard of this. Some border posts used messenger hawks for short-range alerts, quick warnings, small notes, even emergency summons. Not a replacement for couriers, but a supplement. Quicker than any hoof over treacherous terrain. As you descend into the valley beyond, the terrain evens out. Pines return, a stream glimmers beside the trail. Your pony relaxes, ears forward. The scent of the station up ahead already catching her attention. You arrive to find a bustling post, almost a tiny village. Several yurts, a wooden corral, a row of drying herbs strung between trees. Children laugh as they chase a spotted dog, who seems delighted by the attention. The station master waves from a doorway, scroll in hand. You dismount stiffly, hand off the message, and stretch your aching knees. The fire inside smells like ginger and mutton. You sit beside it gratefully, a young courier in training eyes you. Curiously, how far have you come? You shrugged, then answer, from the center of the map to the places that have no names. She nods solemnly, as if this makes perfect sense. That night, someone plays a reed flute. You sip broth, thick with lentils and garlic. An old man tells a story about a courier who once rode 3 horses to death to deliver a warning. The 4th lived, the 5th carried him home. You glance at your own mount outside the yurt, dozing by the firelight. We'll go easier. Tomorrow, you whisper. Tomorrow, the path leads closer to Empire's edge. Closer to the zone where the yam thins, stretches, and finally runs out. But not yet. Tonight, it's still here alive, breathing, coiled in firelight and silence. By now, the yam feels less like a route and more like a memory you're moving through in real time. You no longer wonder what day it is. Your internal clock has surrendered to the rhythm of firelight, saddle creaks, wind direction, and the way. Post-station bread tastes, different depending on who bakes it. You set out early, again always, early with the faintest fog licking, the ground like spilled milk. This far into the frontier, the yam takes on a ghostly quality. Stations appear when you need them. Riders materialize, deliver a sentence, then vanish again like smoke. The land begins to harden. You ride into high scrubland, dotted with jagged rock formations and dry gullies. Somewhere out here, the boundary of the empire lies unmarked but understood. Not a wall, not a gate, just a thinning of presence. You feel it in your chest. Your current dispatch is heavy not in weight, but in implication. The seal bears a crest you don't recognize. The wax is darker, almost black. The station master who handed it off did so with both hands, head slightly bowed. You didn't ask questions, but you feel it pressing against your chest as you ride. This message matters. You pass an old milestone etched into stone. 3 days' ride to the last station. Someone scratched out the 3 and carved in a 2. Someone else scribbled in depends on your horse. You smile. Humor survives everything. The yams, outer stations, especially near contested territories, were sometimes military hybrids. Half post, half watchtower. Your next one fits that mold perfectly. You crest a ridge and see it. A stocky stone fort with a wooden roof and a corral dug partially into the earth for warmth. Riders in armor stand watch. They nod as you approach. Inside, the fire burns blue hot. The walls are bare but clean. Scrolls are stored in carved stone niches. A handler takes your horse. A commander greets you with tea and a sharp-eyed once-over. You ask no questions, and you offer no stories. You hand over the sealed message. It disappears into a leather pouch strapped to a guard's side, and just like that, your burden is gone. For a few moments, you simply sit. The silence here is different, thicker, intentional. You remember hearing stories of couriers at the edge of empire who were asked to ride, not just with messages, but as scouts, to carry warnings to the next post or even relay battlefield intelligence if needed. Not common, but real. Historians still argue whether these border couriers were regular messengers or something closer to spies trained to observe terrain. Troop movement, even weather shifts. Some say yes, others claim it's romantic nonsense. You've seen enough by now to believe both could be true. You're given a new scroll. The seal is simpler, the wax red and warm from the fire. This one is meant for a civilian post several days east. It's an easy ride compared to the frozen passes or flooded trails you've already endured. You sleep that night in a small side room lined with fur rugs. The wind howls outside. A thin draft whistles through the stones, but the fire holds. You dream of hooves beating against stone, and a map unfolding in endless directions. The next day, the trail bends sharply south. You follow it, pony well-fed and cooperative, sun warm at your back. You spot a lone figure in the distance walking alongside a loaded mule. As you draw near, you see she's a healer robes marked with herbal symbols, bags clinking with dried roots and glass jars. She waves, offers you a honeyed walnut, and says she's heading for a sick camp near the coast. The yam carries news, she adds, but I carry remedies. Then she's gone, humming. You smile to yourself. Another thread in the web. Farther on, you reach a narrow gorge where someone has carved dozens of horse silhouettes into the canyon. Walls, some are tiny, no bigger than your palm. Others stretch higher than you can reach. You dismount, run your hand along one of the carvings. The stone is warm in the sun. The figures blur slightly when you squint, like galloping shadows. You remember a saying one of your first station masters told you: every rider adds their dust to the road. You didn't understand it then, you do now. At your final stop for the day, the station is modest but well cared for. A cluster of yurts surrounded by flowering shrubs, with bees lazily orbiting each blossom. The handler hands you tea sweetened with crushed fruit, and a young girl shyly asks if your horse has a name. You tell her yes, but you make up a new one. on the spot, because some names aren't for sharing that night. As the stars wheel silently overhead and the fire cracks gently beside you, you begin to feel the end of the journey creeping in, not just this ride, but the story itself. You've carried scrolls, heard songs, crossed rivers and deserts and forests. You've spoken to old men, sharp-eyed women, silent dogs, and sleeping gods carved in stone, and all along the way, the yam carried you, too. Morning drapes itself lazily across the horizon as you saddle up one last time. The air smells of mint and damp earth, the sky pale with the promise of clear skies. Your legs creak, your back murmurs, but you mount up without complaint. The gelding beneath you snorts once, as if sensing the rhythm of farewell. You're now nearing the furthest stretch of the yam where its tendrils fade into coastlines, mountain passes, and borderlands too wild for maps. Fewer stations lie ahead, fewer. Riders pass you by. The road thins, curls like a question mark, and asks quietly, why ride this far? And the answer now is simple. Because someone had to dot. As you make your way down a winding trail lined with stunted pines, you begin to think about what happens after the message. Once it's delivered, once the scroll is unrolled and read aloud beneath some lantern or on horseback, or behind thick palace walls, what then? Do the words echo? Do they shape policies, change destinies? Or are they tucked away in some chest to yellow and crumble over time, while the road forgets their weight? You wonder, but not too much. A courier's job is to carry, not to question. The landscape opens into a green basin where an ancient river slithers its way toward the coast. You spot seabirds, distant cousins to the hawks you saw earlier circling lazily overhead. One dips, coasts, then rises again, catching the light just so. You follow it for a while with your eyes, then return to the trail. This was the beauty of the yam. It didn't just cut across terrain, it absorbed it. Sand turned to grass, cliffs turned to valleys, riders turned into legends, and then back into dust. The final station looms ahead, nestled between two hills and half concealed by willow trees. It looks unassuming, no flags, no banners, just a low yurt with smoke curling from its top like a tired breath. You dismount quietly inside. The fire is steady and low. A woman nods at your arrival, gestures toward the mat. You hand over the final scroll, now warm from days, against your chest. She doesn't open it immediately. Instead, she pours tea into a small bowl and hands it to you. Wordlessly. The silence here is heavy, but it isn't uncomfortable. It's earned, you sip. A boy maybe, tenantors with a saddlebag, takes your empty bowl and replaces it with a small loaf of barley bread. You nod your thanks. He nods back, solemn, proud. There's no ceremony, no declarations, but you know this. Your ride is over. Your legs, sore and calloused, have done their work. The scroll is gone, but the story, the ride, will stay with you. You sit by the fire, warming your hands, feeling the last trails of exhaustion melt away. Later, you wander outside, up a nearby hill. From its crest, you can see the glimmer of ocean far beyond the trees. And for the first time, you let yourself stop moving. Somewhere far behind you, a courier like you is just beginning their journey. Another scroll has changed hands. Another pony is stamping. Impatiently, the yam continues. And now, here you are, not in a saddle, not on a windswept trail, but tucked in wherever you are tonight under warm covers. maybe listening to the soft hum of a fan or the steady rhythm of rain against a window. Let yourself breathe slowly now, because this tale, like all the best ones, wasn't really about scrolls or ponies or dust-covered maps. It was about connection. Quiet, sturdy connection. The kind you feel when you know someone somewhere is depending on you, even if they'll never see your face. So picture it now, the flickering fire of a remote post station, the creak of a leather saddle, the smell of tea laced with honey and ash. The world, vast and uncertain, yet made a little smaller, more manageable by the invisible lines people draw between themselves and others. That's what the Mongol postal system did. It threaded the world together, stitch by stitch, hoof by hoof. You were a part of that tonight. So, rest now. Let the hooves fade into the mist. Let the message be delivered. Let the station yacht grow small in the distance. Let the trail curl away behind you like a ribbon in the wind. You've traveled far enough. You've carried more than most, and you can always return whenever you need to. Good night, traveler. Sweet dreams.